I caution parents, don't ever judge a school just by the grade that it's assigned, because there's so much more than what that school letter grade says.
Welcome back to Marion Voices, a product of the Marion Forum Group. I'm Tom Tull. This is Susie Kuhn, and we're talking with Kevin Christian, who's the Director of Public Relations for Marion County Schools. Welcome again, Kevin.
Thank you so much.
In this segment, we want to talk a little bit about student standards, and it's been in the news that, according to the state assessment tests, that Marion County kind of falls in the bottom third of the school systems in the state as far as student performance goes. And I know attendance, which we talked about earlier,
certainly
figures right into that, impacts it. And I know probably that I don't like to say it, but probably some classroom instruction may play a little part in that too.
Let's be realistic.
Yep.
Teacher shortages.
Yep.
And but it gets down to, students have to be, assessed so that we know what's going on. How does the school, or what does the school do for students that fall below the state standards?
We use a system called progress monitoring. And that's kind of a fancy term in my brain for checking students at regular intervals. If you're newer to Florida, you may have never heard of the FCAT. That used to be the state standardized test that was delivered once a year at the end of the year. And that's how you were measured on how much you learned. Once a year. Mm-hmm. So if you got today 160 and you didn't learn much, guess what? You didn't do well on the FCAT. Now we use progress monitoring that goes, I think it's either 4 or 6 periods throughout the year. So it's on a much more regular basis. And so we can compare, we call it PM1 to PM2. Mm-hmm. Start of the year and X number of days later, and then 3, 4, and 5 as well. So depending on how students do on that progress monitoring, if a student does well, and most of our students do, then they continue progressing through that curriculum, whatever it is, math, science, reading, geography, whatever. If they're not progressing as much as we want them to progress, we can put any number of opportunities in front of them. We can do remediation. That's usually a term that's reserved for reading. Mm-hmm. But if you look at reading is involved in pretty much every subject that you cover in school. So even though reading is taught at every level in every class, we do what's called intensive reading, which is very specific skills-based curriculum chosen for that particular student. So your intensive reading can look different than mine.
Yeah. Mine could be more focused on comprehension.
And mine could be more focused on enunciation.
Yes.
Because if I can't say the word, I'm going to skip over it. Mm-hmm. So, and yours could look completely different from ours.
If I had dyslexia.
So, exactly.
It would be completely,
So that kind of process is in place. But I think what the biggest difference these days, and meaning the last couple of years, is the progress monitoring that we didn't really have. We did start of school, end of first semester, end of second semester. Before that, we just did FCAT. Yeah. Now we're doing start of school 10 days later, mid-quarter, end of first quarter, midway through the second quarter, end of second quarter, midway through the third quarter. So you see the pattern that there's much more, I hate to call it assessment, but I don't know of a better word right now, to determine if you're learning what you're supposed to be learning within that time frame. And if you are, you move on. If you're not, then we deliver that specialized instruction. And that specialized instruction may take place in the same classroom. It may take place in a different classroom with a different teacher. Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure that it could also help identify teachers that maybe are falling behind with their instruction. If it's the entire class is struggling to learn different concepts.
Correct.
So not only is it monitoring student progress, but also teacher progress.
That's a great point, and I'm glad you said it, because that is often a way to find out a teacher's success as well. And maybe they didn't realize that they were really skilled and successful at teaching third grade reading.
Yes. Yeah.
They've been teaching the third grade classroom all the subjects, math, geography, science, because a third grade teacher teaches all that every day.
Yeah.
But suddenly the data shows that teacher is really experiencing great success with just the reading component. So maybe we help that teacher, that third grade teacher, become a reading specialist and eventually a certified literacy coach. And so now that teacher's not just helping his or her classroom, they're helping all of the third grade classrooms because they're sharing that expertise with the other third grade teachers through collaborative planning.
Would the principal have the ability, if you have a third grade teacher who's really good at reading, to have another third grade teacher send their reading kids to her, and that reading teacher send her social studies or science kids to that other class? So
there is some flexibility there. Yes, absolutely. What we don't want to do is, and I don't want to say what's in my mind, but you're putting those level 1 students by themselves in that classroom with that teacher, because then, we all become better by being around people who read better than we do.
Correct.
Because it challenges us. So that's what we don't want to isolate those.
Right.
We call it inclusion, and we usually say that with students with special needs, which can certainly exist with the topic that we're discussing.
Yes.
But it's not just for that. So we try to provide those students with that very specific skill that's needed, but not isolate them where they're not challenged to grow by their colleagues, by their counterparts.
Right.
So education hasn't always been that way, and you've been in it long enough. It used to be the exact opposite, where you put all the level 1s in a classroom by themselves.
Yeah.
And it didn't work.
No.
It didn't work, and it still doesn't work.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I was vice principal of a high school that had to integrate special ed kids, some profound, some just into
highly functional,
into age-appropriate setting.
Yeah.
And so we took kids from an elementary school where they were isolated and put them into our high school. And we didn't just throw them in. We spent a year talking to our kids and our teachers and preparing the ground.
Right.
And when we brought them in, those kids who were 15, 16, who were acting like elementary kids, within 2 weeks, you couldn't tell them.
Their environment was different.
It was.
Yes.
And it was appropriate. It was age appropriate.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, yes.
I hope I answered your question.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Good.
Well, it's always the more flexibility a principal has to help kids.
We expect our principals to own their campuses and do what's best for what they believe their campuses need. That comes from staffing, because the principals hire their own teachers.
Oh,
The district
didn't
doesn't
realize
hire
that.
teachers and then say, okay,
And put
you're
them in
going there, you're
school.
going there. Our principals are involved in the interviews and they talk to each other. Absolutely. They are the instructional leaders of their campus.
well, that's good. Excellent. Do teachers or schools face consequences if large numbers of their students do not meet standards?
Absolutely. Just ask the Florida Department of Education. Yes. Schools can go into the term that comes to my mind immediately is turnaround status. That means that if a student has received a failing grade, or I think it's a letter D for 3 years in a row, they go on to a bottom 200 list of the 200 lowest scoring schools throughout the state, and they are progress monitored even more so than what I previously shared. And there are additional resources. There's more money for that, but there's also a stigma that comes with that a lot of times. And I don't think school grades are as impactful as they used to be in terms of parents wanting to know, well, what did that school make? I mean, they still are.
They still are. It's still a part of the conversation.
I always tell parents, please don't judge a school only on the grade that it earns. Because we have smaller schools where if one student in one classroom is having a bad day on testing day, they can lower that school's grade by a full letter. One student.
Yeah.
I mean, it is really possible. That tends to happen more at the elementary school because those schools are smaller and have smaller testing populations. But I caution parents, don't ever judge a school just by the grade that it's assigned, because there's so much more than what that school letter grade says. Mm-hmm. You could have an incredible faculty and staff who are doing just phenomenal, and students who are achieving, but you have some students who aren't achieving and aren't making a full year's growth, and that's a double whammy.
Yeah.
Because that can hurt the school grade even more. So,
and also, I guess the school grade could be affected by the amount of or the number of kids or the frequency of kids moving in and out of that school.
Transient student population, and we have a lot of that. It's certainly because we are so big geographically. Yes. I just left a board meeting this morning where we were talking about a student's family who moved from one high school to another high school in the same district. Usually people, if they're going to move, they'll move somewhere else.
Yes.
Yeah.
But we have a lot of families for job reasons, for
housing reasons,
living, housing reasons, whatever the case may be. May move from one side of the county to the other, or one side of the city to the other. And yes, those student population shifts can absolutely affect not just that student, but that school as well.
What happens to a teacher or a school that continuously shows below level performance? And I guess you've kind of...
Well, ultimately, the school can be closed.
It can.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And we went through that process 7 years ago. And it's a very painful process, again, because the perception is that a failing school is failing in every way, when in reality it's may not be failing in every way, but the data show that it's failing. So we did close a school, and those students were then rezoned for other schools in the area, and we're still dealing with the impact of that 7 years later.
Yeah, I would assume that a lot of parents really hate to lose their neighborhood school.
Absolutely.
Regardless of...
Absolutely.
So,
despite what other people think.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a tough process, but ultimately that can happen.
Yeah. And I guess in a county as big as Marion County, public opinion can weigh pretty heavily, and a lot of times the public that has an opinion does not really know the actual facts or situation for a particular school.
Tom, you said that. I didn't. Okay? You said that.
Yes, I did.
I'm going to agree with you.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times my perception, I'm not a parent, but if I was, my perception of Marion County Public Schools may only be my child's classroom or my child's school. I may never realize that there are 47 other schools throughout the district in a county larger than the state of Rhode Island, with 7,000 employees and 46,500 students.
Yeah.
And we're a mid-sized district in the state of Florida.
Yeah.
You move to the Orange counties, the Hillsborough counties, the Miami-Dades, you're talking hundreds of thousands of students.
Yeah. So I guess that becomes really important for board members to remember that just, squeaky wheels don't necessarily mean that's the prevailing sentiment in the community.
Correct. And I would even go above that and say I think it's important for our community to realize that. I mean, we have 5 elected school board members, but for our community to realize that there are no 2 schools that are alike. Even in a small district, there are no 2 schools that are alike. And we have a couple of schools on the north end that are smaller elementary schools, but when you look at them individually, they each hold their own merit. They're not mirror images of each other. We are too diverse, both in demographics and family situations and job situations and financial situations where no two schools look alike. So we have to realize that, and we have to understand that every school has its own needs.
I have a question for you because we touched on inclusion earlier. Section 504 plans ensure that students with disabilities like ADHD, cerebral palsy, even a temporarily broken leg, that they are given accommodations so that they can be included to the maximum extent in their classrooms. Florida is currently involved in a lawsuit with, I believe 17 states are involved in this lawsuit to determine if Section 504 is unconstitutional. And at the end of the document, it's a 48-page legal document that I've combed over.
Oh my gosh.
At the end, though, it says that they would like to not have to enforce Section 504. If, this legislation, if this
Lawsuit.
lawsuit happens, what would happen in Marion County to all these students that are getting these accommodations who do need them? Would Marion County still be able to offer that, or would it just go away?
I believe that we would still do everything possible to meet the needs of those students.
Okay.
No two students learn exactly the same way. And you may have a class where you have more EBD students, and you know that term, then you have mainstream students. And typically, students with special needs require more resources. That's just a fact.
Yeah.
I mean, we can sit here and talk about it, but it's not going to change. If I'm blind, I'm blind, and I have to have a Braille book. That's just the way it is.
Yeah.
And I believe our board members and our superintendent and our district as a professional organization would do what's best for students and provide those resources.
Okay, that makes me feel better as a parent.
I do. I really believe that. And we've had different people in charge of 504 plans and IEPs over the years. And if you're an ESE parent, exceptional student education parent, you understand all those terms.
Yes.
Or acronyms, I should say. But I do believe that we would still do our darndest to make sure that those students have what they need to learn.
Good.
Now, if they're taking advantage of it,
yes, that's a different situation. Yes.
But if they genuinely need it, absolutely. We have a unit at South Ocala Elementary for students who are deaf and hard of hearing. They are an inclusion model where those students are placed in mainstream classrooms. And if I didn't tell you that those students were hard of hearing, you might not even know that.
That's awesome.
Because again, students often learn best when they're around each other and challenged by each other. So,
do students have to have a specified aid to go with them in those classrooms?
in some cases, depending on the student and depending on
their
the
needs.
accommodation and the need. Yes. Yeah. We have another school, Hillcrest School. Those students typically are more. I don't want to say needy, but their needs are greater and to a much deeper level. And so many of those students will have one-on-one aids with them throughout the day.
And sometimes those needs are not just deafness or blindness or whatever. I know sometimes you have kids that have allergies that are
food allergies,
serious allergies.
Life-threatening food allergies.
You know, they get a whiff of a peanut and they're out.
And we have to take that into account in our cafeterias.
Yes, and that was my son. He was on a 504 plan because of life-threatening food allergies. So as a parent who's had to go through this process to ensure that my child is safe, these protections matter to me.
Sure,
and so it is a discussion that I think we all need to be having, but I feel a lot better just knowing. Good. Yeah.
Well, and I appreciate the fact that Marion County Schools is dedicated to inclusion of students. Like you say, the students learn better from each other, and it's also a quality of life.
It is.
So everybody wants and has a need to belong. We all want to feel included.
And our motto is helping every student succeed. I mean, that is kind of our purpose, And helping every student succeed doesn't look identical in every situation. In many cases, it does. But in the cases of students with special needs, helping them succeed may be to this level versus this level. So again, it depends on the student.
And I assume that these students are also included if they want to go to the vocational school.
Well, we don't have vocational schools like they used to be called.
Wow,
those programs are on our campuses right now. I remember in high school, at lunchtime, the kids who went to vocational school got on a bus and left the school for the rest of the day.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen anymore. No, those programs are already integrated onto those various campuses. You mentioned logistics early in our interview. We have a construction academy for students who are good with their hands and want to go into a trade like that. We have an electrical apprenticeship program for that as well. I mean, there's just culinary arts. I mean, there's all kinds of opportunities.
And those are in magnet schools, kind of like.
Those are in everyday schools.
In every school?
Not every school. No, just like every school doesn't have an IB program, every school doesn't have a construction program either. Lake Ware High School has a construction program. Westport High School has a logistics program. Vanguard has the IB program. Bellevue High has the ACE program.
So
North Marion has the ACE program as well. And Denellen has an electrical apprenticeship program there. They also have some advanced studies, and I'm leaving out I'm leaving out a high school. I'm going to get in trouble here, but all of our high schools offer those kinds of what people have traditionally referred to as vocational programs. Those are spread out through our district. Sometimes there's duplication. Sometimes it's offered only on one campus, and in that case, it would be a magnet program, and you could attend that program
by application.
By application, out of zone, meaning you could provide the transportation for your student, or you could possibly go to a bus stop hub where there could be service. So,
okay, yeah, that was my next question: is if I wanted to be in a certain specialized area, but I live across the county from it, how do I get to it?
You have access to that program, but there's not guaranteed transportation. Again, our district is so large. Can you imagine transporting a student from the Denellen area to the Lake Ware area even? That would be a significant bus ride.
Yeah.
Not to say that we wouldn't or couldn't, but it would not be ideal for that student to be on the bus for an hour and a half each way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
buses, this just popped into my mind, so I'll hit you with it. Some of the school start and stop times have been adjusted because of bus transportation. Is that
absolutely
correct?
Absolutely.
And it may be that we don't have enough bus drivers, or
we don't have enough bus drivers. But the state of Florida also is, I believe it's this coming fall of 25, it may be fall of 26, it's one or the other, where in every public school district in Florida, the school start time, the earliest it can be, will be set by state law. So 7:30, 8:30, that ballpark. I know that elementary schools will be required to start first, and then secondary schools will start later in the day.
Now, why do they do that? Because I understand that high school students, they like to sleep in and all that sort of thing.
It's multiple reasons, but what I understand is that the younger students are more on point in terms of their learning earlier in the day. So getting them into the classroom earlier in the day is better for those skills.
So this is based on scientific knowledge,
it's based,
not just whim.
It's based on what the Florida legislature says. So what they deem it on, you'll have to talk to them. But for secondary students, they tend to stay up later at night for whatever reason, or sleep in more.
Or even sports. They have sports every
more activities
night.
after school. Exactly. So, and jobs in some cases. So their start times will be later. What we decided to do in Marion County was actually implement many of those earlier start times or later start times this current school year. So we had a big change in start times this school year. We should not have the drastic change this fall or next fall
Okay.
because we've already done it.
So we're not going to anticipate
shouldn't-
another major
no,
shift
but,
or anything.
But our buses also do multiple routes.
Right.
Perhaps where we grew up, one bus picked up all students on that route, and they were done until school was over. Not in Marion County.
Right.
I mean, we have about, I'm going to ballpark it here, 250 buses on the road every day. And those buses pick up elementary students, drop them off at elementary school, then they turn around and go back and pick up middle and high school students and do the reverse at the end of the day. Because you know how much a new bus is? I'm going to put you all on the spot here. You know how much a new bus is?
It's over $100,000.
$160,000. Okay. Now that's up about $40,000 to $50,000 over the last few years. So $160,000 bus in Marion County will probably last us 10 to 15 years. Now, guess what the warranty is? Maybe 3 years.
Yeah.
Maybe 3 years. Maybe, I don't think it's 5 years, but let's say, I mean, the average car warranty is 3 year, 36,000.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So we're driving 36,000 miles the first semester.
It's like, it can't be
because
take that
we're
long.
so big. We're geographically large. So we are trying, our school board is working to replace our fleet. The goal is 10% a year. So the goal is to replace 25 buses a year at $160,000 a pop. I don't know that that's going to happen. Now, we do have some new revenue sources. We have the impact fees from new construction, new growth, and we have the voter-approved half-cent sales tax that can only be used for capital expenses, cannot be used for salaries. Okay. So that money is not going into anybody's pocket. It cannot, by state law, be used for salaries. We can use some of those funds to replace buses, but we're building two new schools, two elementary schools that are going to open in August. We have a new high school that's going to open in August of next year, and we're building a replacement middle school for Lake Weir because they're
So we have a lot of expenses here.
We have a lot of
in the
things
district.
going on.
Yeah.
But the voters have been generous in approving that sales tax, which will certainly help. Our school board has borrowed funds, obviously, to build the new schools because the sales tax dollars, I don't think those start coming in for a few more months. So those are always behind the collection point. You don't get those up front. So
Now, where I came from, if there was a major building program, we tried to pass school bonds. Does Marion County have the ability
we still have
to,
bonding. Yes, we bond and borrow, but it's handled more on the back side of the banking industry versus a public vote, if you will. Yeah.
Okay.
Our school board last year, I want to say, borrowed $330 million, something like that, for the three new schools. By the way, a new elementary school is $40 to $50 million, and a new high school is about $140, $150, $160 million, depending on what you put in it.
Yeah.
Fortunately, the school board already owned the land, so the land didn't have to pay the higher prices for the land. And the board had bought that land 10, 15 years ago, something like that. So that expense wasn't
But we're
involved.
growing.
But we are growing.
We are growing. There's people moving here.
You drive
all
out
the time.
200?
Yes.
You drive Maricamp? I drive Maricamp every day to work, and it's a parking lot.
Yeah. And you can tell we need more schools. There's just
Is that where people are moving to, the southeast side and the south
Well, the
side?
southwest side has the highest student growth, and that's where those three new schools are going. Two new elementary schools, and then the new high school. And then
I always think of that area as being the 55-plus community.
well, it
area.
is if you take 200 north of 200. But when you go south of 200 and you take into account Marion Oaks area and the area between Marion Oaks and Stayway 200, that's just a growth corridor. That's where a lot of the old horse farms were, hundreds of acres, thousands of acres. And now those have been divvied up and developed. Yeah. So the new high school or the new, it's middle school. It's elementary school X, which is in the Winding Oaks community, which is just south of 200. That school already has housing all the way around it. Literally.
Wow.
Brand new communities all the way around it, and within walking distance.
That's crazy.
So that school is
It's filling
already
up
filled.
already.
It's already filled. I mean, really.
So you
Yeah.
might have to have an expansion before you even open it. Huh?
Well,
Let's hope not.
the state of Florida doesn't necessarily allow you to build for growth. You have to have the students
In order.
to build the seats.
So you build as you go.
Well,
It's not,
we're building as we go. We're trying to plan for some of that growth and put some of those local dollars that can be used for like classroom wings, those kinds of
Okay.
things. But you have to demonstrate the growth. Otherwise, the state says this is too much of a gamble. You could build this $150 million high school and never fill it.
yeah.
So, but our numbers, Westport, over 3,000 students. That's a college campus.
That is a college campus.
We have Sunrise that I think is 1,200 students on a campus that was built for 840. So you understand, and both of those schools are in the southwest quadrant. So you have Denellen High School, who's bursting at the seams too. So, and it has an aging facility, so they need some modifications as well. So it is. I don't want to say an anomaly, but the state of Florida is growing. Marion County is growing. Not everywhere is growing in Florida,
Yeah.
but Marion County
Marion
is.
County is.
We've never, I believe Marion County Public Schools started in 1869, I think. Don't hold me to that, but something like that. We've never had as many students as we have today, and that's 46,500 students.
Yeah.
And I've seen it trickle up over the last 24 years. When I started with the district, I think we had 33,000.
Wow.
So now we have 14,000 more students.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a lot of schools. That's a lot of teachers. That's a lot of buses.
Yes.
We've been examining school academic performance and growth and school buses and start times, all kinds of things. We're really into all kinds of questions here with Kevin Christian, the Director of Public Relations for Marion County Schools. And I think our discussions illustrate how complicated it is to run a school system and all the different things that are involved. It's not just teachers and students, but it's all
Very
kinds
complex.
of things.
Very complex.
And if you have problems with your school or questions, please go to your school administrator and
Do
ask.
not go to Facebook
Yeah.
as your first line.
Do not blow off steam on Facebook until you know what you're talking about. Go to the school administrator and try to work things out there first. So we also want to know what you think here at Marion Forum Group, and we would like you to send us questions, send us comments. You can find us on YouTube at Marion Forum Group, or you can send us an email at marionforumgroup@gmail.com. But we want to hear from you, and some of your questions or concerns, we'll try and incorporate it into a show, maybe make a whole show out of it. So we do want to hear from you. And if you get on the YouTube Marion Forum Group channel, please be sure to hit like and subscribe and all that good stuff. We're going to take a little break, and then we'll be back to grill Kevin some more.